We spent 48 hours in Gujarat.
Play the theme music. Hello and welcome to this episode of Tripology. I'm Alun and I'm here with the ever airborne Adam.
Hello, mate. Yeah, airborne is right, because we've just had one of the most turbulent bus rides I can remember.
Goodness me. Do you know what? It all started when we committed to leaving Mumbai. We'd been there for quite a while.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how many times I say to myself, it's Asia, it's India, it will figure itself out, it will sort itself out.
Yeah.
Every time I rock up at a bus stand with a bus to catch and say, hey, I'm here for this bus, and I just get waved off as if it's nonchalantly, it stresses me out, man.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously more experienced catching buses in India than I am, and you seem quite sort of blasé and nonchalant about them sending a location. So when you're booking with a private company, they'll send you a location, and you fully understand that the bus will just be there at some point, roughly in that sort of vicinity, right?
Yeah, well, the way I've been booking them, it's difficult to book buses and trains and stuff in India without an Indian bank card.
Right.
So I've been using this company where I basically book a bus and then they buy the tickets on my behalf. It's only very fractionally more expensive.
Yeah.
So they just give you sort of arbitrary pickup point. You arrive there and just wait.
Yeah.
This happened to have a bus, like an office associated with it. But upon asking them, is this the place for the bus? They were just like, it's 2 hours late. It'll be here when it gets here. Come back in a little while.
Yeah, God, but we hot and sweaty and arrived on time under this big sort of flyover, very, very busy road in North Mumbai, and then to be told by the staff, I think they were actually looking after the cargo side of the same business. So lots of packages and stuff being shifted around, and then to be told that our bus was actually going to be 2 hours late was pretty rough.
And the last thing you want when you're taking a night bus, arriving in a new city, we're heading to Jamnagar, and let me tell you, it's like the last thing you want is to be so hot and sweaty when you're getting on that bus, and you just have to basically sleep in your own sweat for the next sort of 20 hours. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so we went out for a little spot of dinner, didn't we, to pass the time, and then came back to said location beforehand, and then it was actually okay, wasn't it? It was only 5 minutes late after being 2 hours late.
Yeah, and then, my goodness, that bus ride, our driver was insane.
And I think he'd been through some sort of rally formation or something, because he seemed to pick up an enormous amount of speed, irrespective of which direction the road was going in or how many potholes he was going over.
I mean, I introduced you as the ever airborne Adam, and that is because at various times during that bus ride, we entered a sort of zero gravity environment where he went over a bump in the road, and it was like everything was suspended for a moment inside our little sleeping box. Yeah. It was kind of like a capsule hotel almost style, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's really important to describe the sort of sleeper buses in India to people that have never travelled on one, but they are essentially like a capsule hotel on wheels.
Yeah.
And you've got this very small corridor. You sort of enter at the front, obviously, past the driver, and then all the way down this very thin corridor. and then either side, you've got, in some there are seats, aren't there, on the lower deck?
Yeah.
And in others, sort of cubby holes where it's quite comfortable, I would say, if you don't mind that sort of thing.
I think so. I think they're quite a nice way to travel.
But if you have a driver like we did, and throughout the entire night as well, I mean, it didn't matter what time of the night it was or how many people were sleeping. Yeah. He was maybe making up for lost time, because he was 2 hours and 5 minutes late, as we've already discussed. But there were certainly on 4, if not 5 occasions, I think I was suspended in midair for about 2 seconds.
Yeah, there was properly 2 seconds of hang time while you were there. It was phenomenal. And our charger flew out of the socket. Our shoes that we had up on the rack would round down and hit the passengers below, like Zeus throwing a lightning bolt. It was crazy, wasn't it? We were raining things down. And obviously the other passengers were upset by it as well, because there were complaints made to the driver about his driving.
Yeah, well, there's only so many times I can go down and recover our possessions from inside someone else's bed.
Yeah.
So, one gentleman got up and started shouting at the driver, who was very, very angry at the way that the guy had been driving. But I was sort of thinking to myself, and I think I said this to you at the time, I can't believe that how sort of well, how would you describe it? Sort of violent and turbulent these sort of collisions felt to us, because we were being chucked in every direction, smacking our heads and elbows together, and it was really, really uncomfortable for a short time. I couldn't believe that something at the back of the bus would have that sort of reaction if it wasn't damaging the front of the bus.
Yeah.
Surely driving over something like that would create such chaos at the back must be doing some damage at the front.
You'd think so. I mean, we were definitely like over the wheel arch at the back. We were perfectly positioned to like catch the most air
in the cheap seats.
If me and you, like surfers traveling to a location where they know they're the biggest waves, if me and you like got off on big jumps in buses, we would pick those seats every time. We were ideally suited to catching the most air.
Do you something I've noticed basically about traveling around with you in India on buses is that there's a lot of domestic travel within India. I haven't been on another bus so far without it being just us two and then Indians. And is that something that you found throughout India as well? Yeah,
certainly. Particularly these long trips to like less touristy locations. Right. Like Jamnagar in Gujarat is not somewhere where a lot of tourists go. We'll touch on that later. But it seems to me like, it's basically you're going to be traveling with other Indians to a place like that. But how did you feel I was as a passenger on the bus? Because this is maybe the first time you've ever taken a sleeper bus with me.
Yeah, well, you sleep for almost all of the entire trip, no matter how long that trip is. If it's 24 hours long, he sleeps for 23 of them.
Yeah, I have told everyone, I've told the audience before on this podcast that I have, like, I call it vehicular somnambulism. Just getting in a road vehicle makes me very, very sleepy.
Yeah.
I mean, was I lying? It's
no.
So true, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. You've been taking the window side of the double sleeper because I tend to get out of the bus to go for a wee.
Yeah.
Listen to next week's episode, and you don't. So I stay awake for a lot of it and need to get out many times. And you seem perfectly fine, just curled up and sleeping almost the entire way. You find it relaxing, a sleeper bus?
I just feel as soon as it starts moving, I feel like I could fall asleep. Wow. And then from that point on, it becomes difficult for me to do anything else. Like if I try and get up, and we try to do a little bit of tripology work, but I'm just very, very sleepy.
Do you actually feel well rested when you get out of the bus as well?
I feel like now I've slept for many, many hours. I feel honestly like it kind of just lulls me to sleep. I take the word sleeper bus so literally.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's amazing. I wish I was like that. In planes, cars, buses, it's the same for me. I don't mind the fact that I can't go to sleep, but I definitely stay awake for a lot of the time. I kind of convince myself that maybe I'm protecting our staff or whatever it might be. But yeah, apart from that, I'm just not able to go to sleep. So it's nice to travel with you because you just sort of nod off and keep yourself to yourself.
Yeah, totally. And then we arrived in Jamnagar in one piece, didn't we?
We did.
And we were quite hungry. So straight away, we thought, let's sample some Gujarati food.
Yeah, we went to a local restaurant that was attached to a hotel, found it on Google, high ratings.
Yeah.
Went there and was immediately told that the thalis that we wanted had stopped being served at 3 p.m.
There you go.
But unfortunately for the restaurant staff, it was 2:56 p.m.
Yeah, okay.
So, I tried to turn on the charm and I said, oh, please, we've heard such fantastic things about Gujarati food.
You're quite good at that sort of stuff. I would have taken it on face value. Oh, unfortunately, the thali is not available. I'd have maybe gone to a different place. But you trust in your own ability to charm your fellow man.
Try. And I also know how much you like thalis as well. So I thought, I've got to do this for Al.
Yeah.
This is bigger than this. Doesn't matter. It's not about time. It's about the fact that Alun wants a thali and he's hungry.
Now would be a perfect time, talking of Gujarati thalis and talking about my hunger and yours, to introduce your item.
Yeah, a rice for breakfast. Yeah. We're going to do a rice for breakfast right now.
All the new people in the audience might not know.
Okay, excellent. Let's do it now.
Let's play the theme music.
Rice for breakfast. You can't have rice for breakfast.
Right, so rice for breakfast is our food item, where we talk about things that we've eaten along the way and how much we like them, if we'd recommend them, I guess. I certainly would recommend this Gujarati thali.
Yeah, you're an exceptional foodie. You love foods. You're curious about all different flavours. So tell us, what was your preconceptions of Gujarati food? How was the thali?
I've been told by multiple people, Indian people, that Gujarati food, and I hope there's no one listening to this that gets offended, but Gujarati food isn't necessarily that inspiring. Apparently, it's got a reputation of being quite sweet and uninteresting when it's compared to other foods, even of neighbouring states, right?
Okay, so yeah, that's interesting. So I don't know I didn't have any preconceptions going in about Gujarati food really, because I don't talk to people about food as much as you maybe do.
Sure.
But you thought maybe it's going to be sweet, maybe it's going to be a little bit boring.
Yeah, so it seems like the food culture is obviously the same. Thali seems quite synonymous with many states in India. So we thought that would be a really good sort of thing to go for, because we know thalis, you can try many different things. And this thing was absolutely massive, wasn't it?
It was one of the most impressive looking thalis that I've had. For people that don't know, a thali is basically like often there'll be a central like carbohydrate, some rice, some chapati, something, and then lots of different mini curries around the side.
Exactly, yeah. So it's sort of a taste and go type situation, and I think the thali actually speaks to the dish itself, doesn't it? The big platter. But I reckon there was upwards of 15 different portions.
Wow, yeah, I would agree.
Including a little sweet one, or 2 sweet ones actually. There was like some whipped yogurt lassi type thing with some nuts inside, and it was pretty good. I mean, if you like trying lots of different things in one meal, I would highly recommend thalis in general, but I was very impressed with this one. I was.
How do you think the Gujarati thali compares to the other thalis you've had in Mumbai?
A bit sweeter and more boring.
You thought it was more, did you?
No, I didn't. I'm joking. I'm just trying to support the previous argument.
Definitely sweeter, though.
Definitely sweeter. Even the dal seems sweeter,
but I
didn't it?
thought equally as interesting, frankly.
Yeah, no, it was good. Quite fragrant, lots of different textures, which I like. Very generous portions, and they came in waves as well, didn't they? I really like the food culture in India, where we sat down and then we started eating, and then there'd be a cup of buttermilk that came along, and then be a couple of more dishes, and then they're free refills, and you really can't go wrong. I think it was 325 rupees, which is about £3.
It's crazy the quantity and the quality of food that you can get so cheaply here. It's really an amazing thing.
I would definitely eat that Gujarati thali. I mean, maybe even on a daily basis for a week or something.
Yeah,
I'd be very comfortable doing that.
Yeah, amazing. Anything else we tried in Gujarat that you liked?
Yeah, we went out actually the evening we arrived, didn't we? We went out quite late and we tried a Pav Bhaji or Pav Bhaji.
I remember it.
As it's probably pronounced.
Yeah, this was almost like a stopgap between meals, wasn't it? Like a little bit of a snack situation.
Yeah, so the bhaji speaks to basically minced up or mashed up vegetables that are then fried and then served usually with a knob of butter on top, just to add a bit of richness, and then served with one of those pav buns that you might remember from the Vada Pav video, if you saw it.
Pav meaning bun.
Yeah, and you sort of just dip and eat and add a few onions or tomatoes if you want. You can make it a little bit more spicy, usually with the chili that's on the table. It's just very fun to eat, real comfort food, isn't it?
I think I love the way as well, the nonchalant way of like a place like that. We just sort of beckoned in. We saw it from outside. We thought this looks quite cool.
Well, it was down an alley, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was like down a side alley. You couldn't easily miss it.
Yeah, and we're shepherded to a table and they sort of like, what do you want? Sort of throw it down at the table. Perfectly polite, but just like obviously didn't care whether we ate there or not. It was just sort of slapped down there. There it is. This is how much it costs. Very minimal. And then, here's your buttermilk. Cool guys. See you later.
Yeah.
It was like... There was no art to the food, but a lot of culture invested in the food. That's how I would describe it. It was the exact opposite of a Michelin star chef garnishing a dish. It was just like real, actual food.
And I think I would say the same about the food and sort of the service and the environment as well. It was very raw, very honest, no frills, knew what it was good at. And the kitchen, it almost looked a little bit like an extension of a catering kitchen. There was lots of like stainless steel of sitting on. It was looked very run down and stripped back, and I love those sorts of places because I think they're very, very difficult to come by sometimes.
Yeah.
And some people might go in that restaurant and think it looked unhygienic. I would even say that, right? It was pretty hot and sweaty. But I loved it. That sort of environment is where I feel really comfortable when I'm eating local food.
My recommendation to backpackers traveling is like get that out of your head, that whole unhygienic thing. I mean, you got to use common sense a little bit. Yeah. Obviously, if there's like actual filth up to your eyeballs, then maybe think twice. But a place like that, which all it doesn't have against like the restaurant where we had the thali, is that the restaurant where we had the thali was very done up and very
sort of upmarket, clean,
exactly,
almost sterile.
But if things look like they're not going to make you sick, they probably aren't. We're living in an age now where like filtered water is ubiquitous across India. Delhi belly isn't the thing that it used to be, Places like that are perfectly safe. If you're worried about hygiene and all that stuff, just try and get it to the back of your mind while you're traveling, because you'll miss out on places like that Pav Bhaji place. And it was the best Pav Bhaji that I've ever had.
Yeah, I think it was really characterful. I think it was a lot about that I will remember for a very long time. It was filled with locals and everyone was sort of looking at us and smiling, and it was just a great experience all round.
So there you go, rice for breakfast. Adam, Gujarati food exceeded your expectations?
Yeah, give it a go.
Okay, well, we've got to tell you the reason why we actually went to Jamnagar. That's really important, and we'll get to that after a brief meditation break. And like a night bus flinging two unsuspected travellers airborne onto the streets of Jamnagar, allow your conscious mind to return into your brain, listening to the back half of this podcast, Tripology Podcast, where we talk about backpacking in general, backpacking stories, backpacking culture, and why the hell we ended up in Jamnagar, a place which, for all intents and purposes, not many travellers go when they come to India, but it is the location of something very specific and meaningful to me in particular.
Yeah, something that we sort of touched on a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah.
It's really nice to have this kind of emotional, historic, significant focus to our trip.
Because this is very much the continuation of what we did in Balachadi, which was go and see the place where my grandparents went to secondary school whilst they were in India. But Jamnagar, and specifically Balachadi, was where they had their first experience. They briefly got organised in Bandra in Bombay, and then they were sent and had all of their formative years in India in Balachadi. So we were very much going to see where it was that they stayed in the orphanage in Balachadi after basically leaving the slave labor camp in Siberia.
Yeah, and given that we had such an incredible experience in Balachadi,
we certainly did.
We thought, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We'll go there with exactly the same plan, which was almost no research.
Yes, almost no research, just turning up, seeing what we can find on the ground at street level. And that essentially led us to just get in a rickshaw and head towards Balachadi.
Which is, there's almost nothing there, is there? It was sort of
about 45 minutes away from Jamnagar, and you could see the landscape become more and more barren and more deserty as we just sort of trundled along.
Yeah, very much so. It was incredibly dry and arid, not really much growing there. It sort of looked like flat farmland, few villages and stuff. And then we got to the village finally.
Well, I mean, even that rickshaw ride, though, was emotional for me. I'll tell you what, because you could really imagine the route that they took.
Yeah, good point.
My grandparents arrived in Jamnagar just by lorry, right? Because they were going through like Iran, Persia and all, and they were just like trying to get, to somewhere safe.
Yeah.
And the Maharaj of Jamnagar like accepted them in and sent them to this orphanage. But that exact journey would have been the journey they took, right? And they would have felt it get more and more deserted and less civilized and out into the desert. And I could sort of empathize with that journey because we were hot and thinking like, goodness, this is like a really crazy landscape. Like imagine how they must have felt. Yeah, freshly recovered from typhoid fever, heads shaved so they didn't get lice, like on that same road.
Yeah, God, it's almost impossible to imagine. But yeah, I guess it was a really interesting journey just trying to get there. And then when we got there, there wasn't much going on at all. Far fewer things than Balachadi, apart from a school that we'd found.
A big, old, fairly modern military school.
Yeah.
And we kind of talked to the security guards at the front, and different reception than we got in Balachadi, it's fair to say. Yeah. They were helpful and very accommodating, but essentially it's this big military complex with a memorial given to them by the Polish foreign ambassador.
Yeah.
So there's like evidence that was the site that they spent time at. But difficult, I think, in that scenario to divorce myself of the fact that there was also like a big model of a plane, a jet plane, and like a bomb like on display, and lots of pictures of Indian classes who attended the school throughout the ages. It just felt very much like a big high school.
Yeah, and then surrounding it there was sort of security fences and that kind of stuff, which changed things slightly. We also did have some conflicting information, didn't we? Because we did meet someone inside the school that told us that people didn't live there back then, but then we were told by other people, and of course the internet, that was sort of
the historical research I've done suggests that school is actually the site that the old camp was.
Sure.
It was referred to as like a little Poland because
really?
They had Polish staff there, they were looked after, they had very little contact with native Indian people. people.
Right, wow.
It was kind of set up as like, have your Polish education here.
Yeah.
We'll kind of gift you the space. So very intriguing from that perspective. I was still able to video call my mom and show her, hey, this is where your parents were like at this orphanage. So it's still beautiful from that perspective.
Certainly worth going. Absolutely worth going.
You know what really stuck out to me, actually? It was sort of an afterthought, but once we'd sort of explored the area and it was time to go, we took a little ride down to the beach. And that felt a little bit more real somehow. And I've actually subsequently learned and read some information that oftentimes the Polish people at the orphanage would kind of sneak out and go and paddle and cool down in the water at that beach. And I've read stories about that. And that, because it was a bit of away from the modernity and the hustle and bustle of the school, I was able there to like really imagine, like they would have definitely in that hot Indian weather, they've gone down to that beach and how relieving it must have felt, that cool water. And I think that was nice to see. Yeah,
completely. And I think what maybe even brought that to life even further was the fact that there were Indian families doing exactly that, weren't there?
Yes.
When we arrived at the beach, which it would have only been like a 10 or 15 minute walk from where the camp was, there were lots of families enjoying the water and it was swelteringly hot. So yeah, it was nice to see that. I'm glad we did that because we were umming and ahhing about whether to go to the beach, weren't we?
It was just sort of like an afterthought because we'd seen the school and the beach was in the opposite direction. It was difficult to get a rickshaw out there in the desert.
Yeah.
Speaking of the rickshaw driver.
Yeah, he was tired, bless him, wasn't he?
He agreed to take us all the way back to Jamnagar. And he fell asleep no fewer than 3 times on the way back at the wheel. Started just veering off ever so slightly.
Yeah, it would have been down a bank. So after surviving the crazy bus journey the night before, it would have been a terrible way to go, wouldn't it? Tuk-tuk ride down a bank.
I mean, to the point where you had to like reach over and wake him up and be like, "You okay, Baya? You okay?"
Yeah.
Like wake him up, and he would sort of smile and look at us through the window, and then carry on trundling along. It was pretty crazy.
Well, he wasn't going that fast. I think that's what caught my attention first, was that he was slowing down when there was no traffic. And I thought, you know, what's he doing? And then his head sort of tilted forward, and I reached up, "Oh, mate, come on.
Is everything okay here?"
There. You are in control of a road vehicle and we're in the back.
Yeah.
I prefer it you were alert.
He took us all the way back to Jamnagar.
Yeah, but not before we went on a wildlife hunt.
Oh, yeah. I almost forgot to mention. That was crazy. That was an unusual thing to say. We saw
a camel.
Yeah.
Really strange. I remember when we were driving up to it, I saw it in the distance in the field, and I even said out loud, "Is that a fucking camel?"
And it turned out to be exactly that.
Yeah.
A fucking camel.
A fucking camel.
Ships of the desert, they used to be called, those, because of their exceptional ability.
I do think that they exist in high numbers in Rajasthan, which is a neighbouring state.
Of course, most populous in the world. In which country?
Isn't not Australia?
It is Australia.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's
good.
where there's more camels than any other country. But of course, in India as well, it turns out.
Yeah, I should know that because I did used to live on a camel farm in the centre of Australia. So I'm glad I got that one right. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, that was cool to see.
Really weird. Lovely sort of docile creature. I did get close. And if you've been following our stories on Instagram at tripologypodcast, thanks very much, you will have seen the camel there. I didn't want to get too close because I don't know what they're capable of.
No, they're capable of spitting. In your face.
Yeah.
That's the camel's real weapon. Much like a llama. Or an alpaca.
Mm-hmm.
They'll hack up some spit and...
Yeah, clock you one.
They will, yeah. That's one of the special moves of the camel.
But it was,
and also the special move of the rickshaw drivers here, I've often noticed. They've been chewing beetle. It's one of the things they share is like they're good for transporting you from one location to another in hot temperatures, and they will spit if provoked.
Isn't it funny? I don't know if we can go down a quick tangent here, but expectation changes experience so much, I think. And sometimes when you're expecting to see something and then you see it, it's nowhere near as good as the fact or when you actually see something that you have no idea you're about to come across, like a camel in a field.
Oh, right. You think because you didn't anticipate a camel, you appreciated the camel more?
I think if someone in the school had said, "Oh, by the way, if you go to the beach, on the left-hand side in the field, there's a camel."
There's a camel there if you want to see it.
If you want to see it.
If you guys aren't satisfied learning about your Polish ancestry and learning about kind of how this is where the other is, we do have a camel in a neighbouring field.
Yeah. So just take a look at that on the way to the beach.
Yeah.
Then it wouldn't have been the same experience, but because it was such a surprise.
Shock to you.
I loved it.
Yeah, interesting. I like that. Yeah.
It's nice.
I don't know. I think I was so in the mode of like, oh, this is where my grandparents used to be. I maybe didn't stop and appreciate the camel as much as I otherwise would have, being an animal lover.
We didn't even get out the tuk-tuk.
A dromedary.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But we did make it back to Jamnagar safe.
And we weren't done there because one of the interesting things about this whole Polish history lesson is that really, for the grace of one individual, the Poles were allowed to enter India and set up this new life.
Mm-hmm.
And that individual was this Maharaj, right? He invited the Poles, basically.
Yeah.
And his grandfather had a palace built in Jamnagar.
Yeah.
Lakota Palace.
That's the one. And we went to it, didn't we?
We went to it because we thought maybe there's some pictures, there's some information, there's something there.
We can sprinkle some of that Balachadi gold dust on the palace and see what comes back.
Exactly. And it was weird, wasn't it? Because we were both quite tired and sort of hot and sweaty at this point. And I was really in two minds about, do we just make our way to Ahmedabad where we need to go next? Yeah. Or do we kind of just push through?
I also, I don't want to say that museums aren't my thing,
but they're not.
But when you've just spent the last 6 hours walking around in oppressive sort of 38 degree heat,
it was the last thing you wanted to do.
Yeah, it was a hot one. But because this was slightly different, it was it did mean a hell of a lot, and it was ultimately the reason why we were there in the first place.
Yeah, you thought, chance it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. So Lakota Palace. It's funny, isn't it? When you start in India saying things like, "Oh, I'm here to see my Polish ancestors, my Polish relatives," you start going down the chain at an alarming rate. Like we told the ticket guy, who told the guy at the entrance of the museum, who told one of the guys. We ended up sat at the desk of the curator of the whole museum, and he ended up giving me information. He was telling me about a Polish filmmaker was there, and he gave me her email address. I've been back and forth with her. She's been sending me information about my grandparents. It's been pretty incredible.
Yeah, I would say that that's quite similar to the Balachadi experience. And once people sort of are invested in your story, your family story, they're really willing to help you out. And we were sort of followed around by 2 or 3 people, weren't we, around the palace, who showed us all the artifacts and explained to us a little bit about what goes on there. So it was really, really exciting.
It makes me happy, the sense of pride that the Indian people clearly have, that their country and their Maharaj was so involved in this kind of process of saving these Polish lives.
Yeah, no, it's exceptional. We found in Balachadi, I think, that maybe lots of the locals there don't necessarily have much of a knowledge. And I found the same thing in Jamnagar as well. But yeah, the fact that you were able to almost unlock that door for a second time and follow the breadcrumbs to this lady that's been helping you out. I mean, it sounds like she's been incredibly responsive.
Yeah, she's been great. She's sent me like a list that we've been looking for of all the Polish refugees coming out of Siberia. It's been really cool. Hopefully that'll be an ongoing conversation and we can figure out some more stuff. She's an amazing filmmaker. She made a film called A Brave Bunch in India, which is available online, but is in the Polish language.
Yeah, she was just there last year though, right?
Yeah, just investigating and doing some research. So really eye-opening, really an amazing thing. I'm really glad we went, and just take that extra step to go to the palace as well, even though we were tired and hungry and all that stuff.
Yeah, it is a beautiful palace as well. Just in isolation, it is definitely worth doing as sort of a tourist attraction in Jamnagar.
Yeah, and thanks for coming with me, man, to the less touristy parts of India to discover about family history. We then decided that the next stop we needed to go to was Ahmedabad.
Which
would act as a gateway to the north. So we're going to talk about that experience on next week's episode.
And it did get a little bit tasty, didn't it?
It certainly did.
It's worth checking out for sure.
Another night bus, interesting experience. I think now would be a good time. Don't tune out for this bit of the episode. It's really, really important because we've got an amazing new community of listeners and we really, really want to engage with you guys. And the best place to do that is over email for people who want to write in-depth questions to us.
That's it. tripologypodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
We answer each and every one of those emails in thorough detail. Any backpacking questions, any backpacking stories that you want to share on the show, anything like that, that's the place to do it. And we also have an active and thriving Instagram community.
Yeah, which is @tripologypodcast. Check us out on there.
Yeah, and that's where we do funny skits and reels and all that sort of stuff. So important, if you're listening to the show, if you're a fan of the show, get on one of those platforms or both of those platforms, send us an email, follow us on Instagram, and after the show finishes, we do a little relax behind the scenes Patreon show that you can find
patreon.com/tripologypodcast.
So thanks for coming on board. Thanks for listening to the show. Thanks for just investing in our story and our story as backpackers and my family story as we go through Balachadi and Jamnagar and explore India. So happy to have you on board. We'll go to the Patreon section now.
Can't wait for it. We'll see you there.
Bye.